going to be reading Symphony of Love, which I'm very excited about and have been enjoying immensely.
Yes.
Yeah, Bruce Rawles and Lynn Johnson here. And we're reading the Symphony of Love. It's basically the um, what would you say, a compilation of writings of Ken Wapnick and
Well, I put the cover title since the digital version doesn't lend itself to quickly going back to reading the copyright page. I put the title and subtitle from the book into my calendar item so I can see it every week. It's a Symphony of Love, selections of Dr. Kenneth Wapnick's writings, autobiographies, poetry, short stories, and articles edited by Gloria Wapnick, his wife. So, and it's been around for a while now. And we're in my digital version, 34 pages into it, and plenty more to go.
plenty
I
more. So
Yeah, I have us the place where we left off. It was the let's see. By the end of March, it burst upon me totally unexpectedly. I became very involved with the Duino elegies. Is that did we go past that?
let's see, I think we might have gone past that.
I think we might have too. So
Because according to my bookmark,
okay,
we are in the temple with Ken. Uh,
okay.
so as I sat in the temple that afternoon, we could go back a paragraph um, to kind of get us up to where we are.
Okay.
And I don't know if
Let's see.
you're
I'm
there.
going to look for as I sat in the temple. Is that the phrase I need to look for? As I sat.
It's page 38 on my digital copy, but that's, of course, I have the font kind of large.
Okay, I see. As I sat in the quiet, let's see.
I think that,
How about if I was still thinking where to go?
yeah, okay, all right. I was still thinking where to go. I moved it back to that.
Okay,
So yeah. So do you want to read or you want me to read?
there we go. I got it.
Okay.
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. All right. I was still thinking of where to go, if at all, and none of the possibilities, either in Poughkeepsie or the temple, which my family attended, appealed to me. Then a friend invited me to spend the holiday with her and her family in a Brooklyn synagogue, whose services she thought I would like. That seemed to be the right place, and I decided to go for Yom Kippur, the holiest and most solemn day in the Jewish calendar. I went and for the first time in my life fully participated in a religious service. The language, chants, and songs felt a part of me, and I felt a part of them. It was not the service itself, nor the meaning of the day, but the atmosphere I responded to, and which enabled my soul to experience the day as something special. And see, capitalize something special. This is an autobiography by Ken, by the way. So
Hmm.
this part here is his own writing about his life. So as I sat in the temple that afternoon, I realized that the moment of the priestly blessing would soon be approaching, the part in the service when the members of the priestly caste mount the pulpit and bless the congregation. It is a particularly solemn moment and is only done at special times during the year. The blessing invoked is that originally given by God to Aaron, the high priest, and all of his descendants are thus able to give this blessing. Excuse me. Therefore, in contrast to Christianity, a Jew is a priest by virtue of his birthright, that is, as a descendant of Aaron. Any priest who does not wish to mount the pulpit must leave the synagogue during the ceremony. I am a priest by that definition. And since my father had never in my lifetime performed the blessing, I had never seen it, though as a child I had frequently attended the high holiday services. So I guess, excuse me, so sorry for that. Um, so I guess that when this came up this time, when he was a kid, they would leave. because his father wouldn't do the priestly thing. I'm assuming that's what he's saying here.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he'd never observed it because they had never been there when it was happening.
Maybe. Huh?
That's interesting.
Hmm.
Or that's my interpretation. I may be wrong, but seemed kind of like that what he's saying here.
Hmm.
As soon as I realized the blessing would be coming, I felt a very strong desire to participate. I did not know what to do, but planned to follow what the others did. The actual blessing, however, was familiar to me. And so when the time came, I joined in the ceremonial washing of the hands, and having first taken off my shoes, mounted the pulpit. We faced the congregation with the prayer shawls over our heads and raised the part which hung over with our hands, our fingers held in symbolic manner, which my father had once showed me. We then began to chant, or more correctly, they did, for I could not utter a sound. The others intoned the blessing in a manner and tone I had never heard before. It was primitive and raw, totally unlike the beautiful melodic structure of Jewish prayer. I felt I was back in some ancient time and place, performing a primitive religious rite. And there I was in the middle of it. I was thoroughly shaken, and when it was over, I stumbled back to my seat, not really sure what had happened. I gathered from the business as usual demeanor of those around me that nothing unusual had occurred, and that whatever did occur had actually been something within me. Sometime after I felt that I should have liked to have done the blessing with my father, and decided the following year I would ask him to join me. Wow. At the close of the service, I felt that the whole holiday had been an important spiritual experience of which the blessing had been the center, and one which I truly did not understand, but had certainly affected me. And afterwards, I would occasionally sing some of the Jewish prayers and songs to myself, and occasionally play them on my clarinet. The most important of these was the Kol Nidra, the haunting chant which opens the Yom Kippur service. I had bought a recording of Arnold Schoenberg's Kol Nidra, and for a time played it quite frequently. When later on I wished to say a blessing before and after my meals, I began with the traditional Hebrew ones, and was quite surprised how well I had remembered the words and melody of the lengthy prayer, which is said after one has eaten. In time, I replaced them with my own. Throughout this, I felt and believed nothing involving religion. I kept none of the Jewish observances and did not attend services. For me, it was merely providing a form or means of expression to express a more basic spiritual experience of God. So I'm finding this really very interesting because it's like he knew he wasn't experiencing it like um he was experiencing it in a very visceral kind of way, not like a a God in the sky far away from me kind of thing. I think he was experiencing it very much within his entire being. And so, that I noticed that a lot myself. I experienced that a lot myself, um, because having been a Catholic and still am a Catholic according to my own thinking here, whenever I go to a Catholic church, what I do very frequently, especially when I'm traveling, if I get to a place where there's one nearby, I will go to the mass and whatever. And I know all the words and all the blessings, and you say this then and this then, and some of it's in Latin and other of it is not, and all of that. And I don't believe the basic Apostles' Creed of the church that Jesus, was, died and went to hell and came back, and all the the story of it. I don't really believe it that way, but I experience it in a visceral kind of way that really speaks to my soul. So I really get, I think, what he's saying here, that even if he didn't really, he said, I didn't really believe it, but I still did it because it gave me a form or means of expression uh, for a spiritual experience of God. I don't
Mhm.
know. What do you think about that?
Well, as you read that and we're discussing it, I was thinking, it's really what we bring to anything that makes it what it is. I mean, those early workbook lessons point that out very, very nicely. We've given everything all the meaning that it has for us. And so if he brought meaningfulness to that ritual, then it would have had that meaning for him. And just as, if I watch a movie or look at an eagle up in a tree branch on the other end of the neighborhood or, what whatever it is, take out the trash, it could be anything that we do or don't do. We're ascribing meaning willy-nilly left and right to everything that seems to happen to us, but it's all really taking place in the mind. And um, so I think he's mentioned, I think that really wasn't about the form. I mean, maybe in not a terribly obvious way, but I think I got that from what you just read, that it was really more about, well, he says it was merely providing a form or means of expression to express a more basic spiritual experience of God. So, I mean, that last sentence kind of, I think, summarizes the idea that he was aware on some level that it wasn't the ritual itself, it was what he was bringing to it, and particularly, what thought system he was bringing to it. You know, willingness to experience and an expectation to find meaning.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
much so. And I could see this in so many other ways too, because I'll attend uh like songs or not really so much, but like uh where you go and chant together, that kind of thing. And really is or drum circles, or, there's so many ways
Hmm.
that are, I mean, you could look and say, well, this is superstition. This is, God is not paying attention to this stuff and doesn't really care. But obviously, some part of God does because it's connecting me. So my connection to spirit is really enhanced by a lot of these ceremonies or, I mean, I know it's superstition. I know that it's all made up. I know that, that there was no special people that God gave special effects to or anything like that. Um, and yet, the essence of it is really a special effect. I really do experience it. And I'm sure people do. I mean, obviously, I'm not the only one. I'm sure a lot of people experience it and have great uh, 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 openings or whatever from it. But I don't know. I think it's not so. I don't think. I think there's a fine line. I guess I can say that. I think there's a fine line because even when we pray, we'll say, can you pray us in or let's pray into this or whatever. Really, what are we saying here? Are we actually connecting with spirit and in that connection having an experience? Or are we just saying the words and doing that because, you know, it's expected and it makes sense? Anyway, uh, just a thought. So
Yeah, yeah. And the expectations, of course, depend on what our motivation is. So i- if we it's the old, you see what you want to see kind of thing. Um, and I was just kind of flashing on, that all the things that we probably don't think as rituals is, um, it might be watching a congressional hearing or chatting with someone at a laundromat or ge- being on a Zoom call. I mean, everything really could have whatever meaning we ascribe to it, but it's I keep coming back to this, like it all, the outcome really is determined on which thought system I'm bringing to bear in any given moment.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's all a dream. So that's it. It's all a dream.
Hmm.
So and Robert has posted some things in the chat specifically to you because he's sending you, he wants you to read
Yeah,
one of his essays, but he
I
does
just,
say
yeah,
if he did go into hell, he would have put out the fire.
yeah, I thought that was pretty funny too. Yeah,
That's pretty funny.
right. Yeah. Well, we're all, you know, I think we're all in the relative stages or phases or degrees of denial. It's the old it's not hot and I'm not here denial of hell that we do
Exactly.
in order to maintain a seeming existence in a dualistic world. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All
So anyway,
right.
thanks, Robert. Yes.
So would you like to read a bit?
Sure. Sure. As the time approached for Yom Kippur, a year later, I began to prepare by memorizing the prayers of the blessing, as well as feeling more deeply the meaning of sharing the experience with my father. The holiday fell shortly after the Labor Day week I had spent at Montauk. My father had agreed quite readily, and so together, father and son, we mounted the pulpit. The service prior to this had been distinctly different for me than the preceding years, as I now felt only moderately involved, since my soul was not really engaged. Likewise, with the blessing, and that's with a capital B again, it was an extremely important occasion for my father and myself, I felt, and I was proud and warmed by our joint participation. But the intense, almost numinous quality of that first time was not present. In and of itself, the blessing was merely a part of the ordinary service. The concluding sections of the service seemed interminable to me, and I was quite happy when it was over. I knew too that my involvement with Judaism was over as well, at least on the level I had known it, for God no longer resided in it for me. I did conduct our family Seder the following spring, 1972, with my father and brother on either side of me, but that, as with the second blessing, seemed more related to my family than with God as I experienced him at that time, still making such distinctions. So after Yom Kippur of 1971, religion as such once more held little interest for me. And it just I was thinking of that initial experience. A lot of times when we have a first experience with something, I think we often tend to, or can, and I can certainly think of a few situations where you ascribe specialness to it, and it gives an extra meaning because maybe it's a shift in awareness, and then you tend to associate the shift with that particular experience rather than the shift in the mind, and it's another very common, I think, source of level confusion.
Well, and that's what when you have that kind of experience, you want to have it again.
Right, right.
And,
And so,
and
and so
so,
you go to the same place or with the same person, or you do the same activity, or you try to replicate the form, and instead of realizing it's the content that's what you really want. And the
yeah,
content
yeah.
is really a decision in the mind and not a particular or a specific in terms of space, time, and conditions.
Yeah, so the next year when he went and did it with his dad, which he thought he had expectations that it
Hmm.
would be a even maybe grander than the experience he had before. And so after that, and it didn't live up to obviously the expectation that he had.
Uh-huh.
And then he said, well, I knew that my involvement with Judaism was over.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I did what I thought was going to be the great thing, and it turned out to be nothing, which is, uh, you know, um, we do that over and over and over in our lives, really, where, you know, and we keep looking.
Right, right,
We keep going back thinking, well, surely there must be a pony in that barn,
right.
you know?
I I found a dime at this street corner last week. Why is it not here again when I came back to it?
Yeah, exactly. But that isn't that the way the ego operates is, in instead of uh recognizing the disappointment comes from the fact that nothing really ever happened except in my own mind, and I can recreate that anytime. I blame the world. I say, well,
Hmm.
you changed. This is not the good thing I
Right.
thought you were. He
Yeah.
didn't. He just said, no, this is not what I thought.
Special love turns to special hate, as the Course would say, and disappointment haunts all our dreams, as the monkeys would say.
Exactly. Exactly. As the monkeys would say. And now I'm a believer. Hey, that was number one when I was 14 years old. Uh,
Yeah.
that's,
There was a
you
pop.
have those,
Oh,
what
I
was
remember.
number one the year,
Yep. Hmm.
all right. So, you want me to continue? I'll continue.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, I return again to the general time sequence, picking up the thread just after Labor Day 1971. The good feeling of that whole period remained with me. And okay, I'm sure you remember 1971. I'm sure you do because you were there.
Hmm.
And there were things happening. Me too. There was a huge spiritual energy that was moving through us at that time. And maybe it's been moving through us the whole time. And I just only recognized it then because I was, young and carefree.
Yeah, the
Uh,
early 70s, there was Earth Day, and there was kind of like the transition from the hippie 60s, peace, love, and whatever, uh, ethos to so okay, now let's take it to another level kind of thinking. And I was in high school at the time, and I realized that there was some possibilities there, and I began to read a lot of my mom's metaphysical books, and so including the Baird Spalding books and a bunch of others. And so yeah, I can definitely relate to that in terms of that particular era, and would be easy to ascribe specialness to that too.
yeah, it would be because I
Yeah.
also just realized that you and I both were in the era of the Vietnam War.
Right, right.
And you would have been up for the draft.
It's funny you should mention that because I hadn't thought about that in a long time. And just this morning, last night, my wife and I watched a very well done movie called Hidden Life, about a conscientious objector in Austria who was called up to serve by the Nazi army. And anyway, a very, very moving story, and superbly well done, incredible cinematography in the Alps and whatnot. And I was thinking about how, I had a high draft number when I went off to college, UC Davis in California, and I had a high draft number, so I didn't have to deal with all that. But the thought crossed my mind at the times, like, well, I wonder if I didn't have a if I had a low number, and the draft would would have got me. Uh, I didn't have to answer that, theoretical questions like, would I have gone to Canada or something to avoid the
Right.
draft,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of thing. But those are the kind of questions, you ask yourself when you're in those kind of situations. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on back then.
Oh yeah, oh
So,
yeah.
I get this, I feel this connection with Ken in this place, in this way, that he was going through this spiritual, uh, upheaval at the same time,
Hmm.
and beginning to see things that he had been not even aware existed
Yeah,
prior
yeah,
to this. So pretty cool.
yeah.
Okay. So I return again to the general time sequence, picking up the thread just after Labor Day 1971. The good feeling of that whole period remained with me, but as the weeks went by, I began to notice that my daily rhythmic patterns were becoming more difficult to adhere to. In the past, the various periods of my life, along with the most ritualistic things I would do, had flowed naturally along, and for the most part did not involve any struggle or feeling of sacrifice. Now that began to change. At first, I was able to recapture the inner connection to God by holding to my schedule. And when I was able to sustain it, I felt very grateful for the ritual or schedule for holding me in place so that as I experienced it, God could return. But more and more, I felt myself slipping, and sustaining my schedule became increasingly difficult. I certainly did not feel comfortable with just abandoning it. I felt that I would clearly lose everything and be left with no way of connecting to God. And this is, I mean, isn't that kind of the state that we're all in at some point? And especially even now, we have uh, our our rituals, our obligations, our
Mhm.
uh, superstitions. I keep saying the word superstition because I really think that that is a big part of it.
Oh yeah,
A
yeah, you're
belief
right.
in the animation of things, and I mean, I think about, we play games at night, in like board games, etc. And I noticed there's one game that we play with the dice. It's called Farkle, and it's pretty fun. It's really just roll dice and count numbers. But uh, I noticed that everyone has a little bit of a ritual for how they're, getting ready to roll the dice, or they're rolling the dice and they're talking to the dice and all that business. And I'm thinking, these dice are not. This is just a random, 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 random. And there's no way that I could affect any part of this by anything I think or say or do. And yet I find myself thinking, saying, and doing things that are ritualistic
Yeah, yeah,
because there's still some part of me that thinks that that pattern is going to make a shift. I mean, just look your whole life. You've been put into places where you had to adhere to patterns in order to be able to succeed.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, Lynn, as you're saying that, it occurred to me that we've chosen the chaos of the ego. I mean, and that's all its quote laws unquote of chaos in order to experience a randomness and a haphazardness that basically reinforces the idea of victimhood. It's like, well, oh, gee, this person came down with this incurable disease, and this person was hit by a train, and this person, yada yada, and it keeps going. And it's like, well, we all have these, seemingly chaotic, random things happen to us, and yet even though it would be, uh, I think, absurd and unkind to say that we're choosing everything specifically on the level of form, but what we are choosing, and even though it's mostly unconscious, but we are continuously choosing the ego thought system, which we've made to be random and chaotic, so that we have a built-in, seemingly endless supply of scapegoats and ways to deny our complicity in uh, choosing misery. It's Ken Wapnick's mantra of "I exist, but it's not my fault." As the ego's insanity. Yeah,
Yeah. And so, how I mean, I notice myself doing it all the time, in one way or another, and recognize that it is, I'm making up rules for how things should go because my, ego thinks that without some sort of rules about it, that we would go crazy. We would be lost. And so, this is why we get caught up in ritual, get caught up in, I mean, cultural rituals and religious rituals and, uh, political rituals and all these different things that are literally meaningless. And yet, we give them meaning, like our lessons are saying right now. About this meaningless world that we've given all the meaning that it has.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those early workbook lessons are so profound, aren't they? I mean, and when you first read them, you kind of get a sense of the depth of them, but it's I think after going through them year after year and experiencing the increasing depth of how deep they really are. I mean, we've so, you know, diligently and vigorously tuned out the idea that we're in a dream and that we're projecting and all those kinds of ideas that it's usually a very gradual, slow process to awaken to that idea that we're doing that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And, one thing that, of course, this is just my own opinion, but, although, excuse me, I think it might be Jesus' opinion too, but I'm not even sure. But I know what he says in the introduction to the workbook. He says these lessons, all right, they go along with the text, the foundational teachings of the text. And without that foundational understanding of the text, then these lessons, they still have meaning, obviously, but we don't experience the meaning of them as well. And I know there's a lot of people who say, well, just do the lessons, don't bother with the text. The text is wordy, the text is this, but I don't see it that way. And I actually never have. I've always seen that the foundation of the text really is what sets us up to be able to do the lesson. Because just start with these um, random thoughts. Nothing I see here means anything. If you didn't have that foundation of uh, nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists, if you didn't have that foundation from the course, then, I think it'd be really easy to mistake what it is that you're doing, or just maybe do it kind of out of order. Anyway,
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
said the text is really without that you can't really understand the lessons.
Yeah.
But
I suspect that anyone who's drawn to the course would have at least some willingness to question their values and the meaning that they've given things. And so, I mean, I don't think, you know, uh, and even if it's just something that they read and they say, "Oh, this is not for me," and they set aside, and it's, a 20-second exposure in a bookstore, and flipping open to the first page or the first workbook lesson is it's like, okay, well, this isn't for me. But then there must have been something on some level that they were drawn to, and maybe it's planted a seed for some umpteen lifetimes later. Who knows? I mean,
yeah,
we
yeah.
we don't know the whole story. We don't know the atonement big picture or how extinction happens or any of that, right?
No. And in fact, I read the Marianne Williamson back in 1993,
Mm-hmm.
Return to Love. I had no thought whatsoever of buying A Course in Miracles, or it didn't even occur to me.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, I was, really deeply into my spiritual seeking at the time, and, reading the Celestine Prophecy and all
Oh
those other
yeah.
books that were out at the time.
We, my wife and I even had a Celestine Prophecy study group at one time in our house, a weekly group talking about that and reading. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and, there you go. There's your mystical program for
Yeah. Yep.
anyway. Um, okay, so more and more I felt myself slipping and sustaining my life schedule becoming increasingly difficult. So he was trying to keep a program going that was helping him kind of keep himself in line. But and he felt that if he didn't keep up with this mystical, or I call superstition, this belief that doing this way was going to be helpful, that he was going to lose everything and be left with no way of connecting to God.
Mhm.
That's pretty profound.
But yeah,
uh
I think that you really you got a great word there, superstition, because it's basically it's a kindred idea to magic thoughts. We think that if I put myself in this particular circumstance, I'm going to have this kind of experience. Well, no, the choice of how we experience everything is our choice in the mind, not the choice of geography or space-time coordinates or who happens to be present in any given situation. and all those kind of particulars that we ascribe that meaning to. And that's that whole category of superstition really is I think akin to, or if not maybe a subcategory of the general topic of magic that the course talks about.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like feng shui,
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
arrange your furniture correctly.
Right. And that'll change your thinking. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
it may be, if it depends on how much you believe in it, and so
How much power you give to it.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, then it is
But
that
that,
is
I
the
think I think there were a couple of experiences that helped me kind of go past that. One of them was, and both of them involved a friend in Los Angeles named Paul Beaver, who was uh, a musician, and he had a recording studio that he worked with a lot of musicians of that era back in the 70s and the 80s, and uh, I went to visit his studio in LA, and he had this big Moog synthesizer, and there's this whole warehouse full of musical, miscellany, harpsichords and a giant Yamaha organ and all this stuff. And anyway, he introduced me to this little biofeedback training machine, and I, got to where I put that on my head, and I could experience the alpha rhythms that were, very relaxing and, kind of a brain state basically. But I realized that, well, at a certain point, I could just go to that state without the device.
right, because it's
And it
there.
was like, well, it wasn't the device. It might have been a catalyst or something that helped me, a training wheel, basically mechanism for realizing that I could do that. And then the same thing was, I originally planned to go to record electronic music in the Great Pyramid in Egypt, near Giza, and with the same fellow, and I'd taken off a year from school in fall of '73, and that's when the Egypt Israeli hostilities broke out, and ended up never going, even though I got my passport and shots and everything, and had, was ready to go, but in some ways, but it never happened. But until 19 years later, when I ended up going with Greg Braden and doing a lot of the same things that I would have done, but in a very different context. But I remember laying down inside the granite box that they call a sarcophagus in the room they call the King's Chamber, I think both of which are misnomers, um, and toning and experiencing the amazing acoustics of that, where the resonance of that box and the room and one's physical body and the echoes going up and down this structure called the Grand Gallery. That acoustics are just phenomenal. I did some basically what would become known as spreadsheets on a Fortran program when I was in high school, and and that kind of got me into all that kind of wild stuff. But what I noticed is that the sound and the state of mind that I experienced doing the toning in that granite box in that chamber, um, was a pretty interesting experience. It felt like a thousand voice choir singing through me. And then I realized that I could go to that same state, kind of like the algorithms, in my brainwaves. I could go to that state whenever I wanted to, and it didn't depend on going all the way to Egypt and going to this particular room in a pyramid to do that. So
It's a lot cheaper.
yeah, and it's a lot cheaper too. Yeah, but so I think the idea is this: there's nothing wrong with the catalyst, but to make them a special thing, and a catalyst really doesn't, in terms of chemistry, it really doesn't take part in the reaction, but it can help trigger it. So, but I think it's easy to make special idols out of catalysts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. Well, and I mean, you're coincidentally, although not the same well, in essence, yeah, it was when I started discovering LSD, and I got really attracted to it because of the Beatles and spiritual experiences that people were having. And so, and I know this is not, common, although people in my generation maybe, had a lot more of it than what you might even know. But yeah, that's the same thing with me. I would take that, every day. I took, LSD every day for a very long time. And uh, you know, found myself in that space, in a space that was very mystical, like all the time, in this very mystical and um, open mm, place. And it was really, really lovely. And after a while, I became, started, doing more focused meditation. And I joined up with a group of Buddhists for a while. And and then the teacher in that group, Chogyam Trungpa, he would say, well, you could take LSD one time, and if you didn't get what you think, don't do it again. And, that's where I got the idea of, well, I've taken it many times, and, you're right, it's a temporary state. But then I began to recognize that I could go into that state anytime because it was in my mind. It wasn't some drug that was giving me a state. It was basically something that was, and I don't even know if it was really breaking down the barrier, because really, in essence, there is no barrier. But it was making me think it was breaking down the barrier, in which I felt free to allow myself to experience this mystical state. And once I realized that, yeah, he's right. If I'm not experiencing this mystical state all the time, doing it one time or 100 times or 500 times, may put me there. But when I come right back to the same mind afterwards, then what really has happened here? And then I
Hmm.
realized, oh, I could be there now.
Right.
And, I basically, I stopped doing it. And, I've done it a couple times as, my older age. Um, with people that had not done it or had wanted to but didn't feel safe. So I said, okay, I'll trip with you. And really recognize that, nothing, nothing happened. I can
Mhm.
understand why when Richard Alpert took his drugs to India with him, in was it the Maharishi? It was whatever.
What his guru at the time, I think there was an anecdote I think you're referring to, took a whole everything he had in his suitcase all at once, something
Yeah,
like
he
that.
took it
Yeah,
all. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And didn't experience anything. And
Right, right.
and
Yeah.
and so
I
that's
think I remember that story. That was pretty humorous. Yeah.
it is a pretty amazing story, because if you ever did it, and you like be like, how can that be? But then I recognize, oh yeah, it can be, because this person is there already. So all this stuff is just putting chemicals in there that are not really doing anything
It's a
other
decision
than
of the mind. It
the
comes
decision of
down to
mind.
that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then there's that line in, I think it's in one of the pamphlets, says they merely give form to his desire. Special agents seem to be ministering unto him, but they merely give form to his desire. So I think that's the phrase.
Yeah.
I'll look it up, put it in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think about also my friend John Mundy,
Uh-huh.
who in he talks about pretty extensively, going to South America and doing these uh drugs with this shaman to, do this spiritual awakening thing. And he was an experimenter with his brain as well. So I think that's why I connect with John so well. So like we're both like, yeah, been there and done that. But yeah, it really, it's whatever gets you to that state where you recognize that this is closer to my natural state than how I'm living my daily life.
Hmm.
So, and yeah, and because the one thing with acid LSD is, if you're having a good time, you are having a really good time. You are laughing, everything is beautiful, the colors are bright. It's just so wonderful. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And that, but there are a lot of people who have really terrifying experiences with it too. That, because it just brings up whatever is there. And so if you're paranoid or worried or afraid, you're going to have a bad trip.
So
But if
that reminds me of that Star Trek movie where they go back in time to San Francisco, I think in the 70s or 80s, and there's Spock and Kirk are walking around trying to disguise themselves. Spock has a cap over his ear so no one sees him, and they're seeing this guy that looks like he's strung out on something, uh, and I think it was Kirk, Spock, and Scotty, and Scotty, it might have been Scotty or Kirk who said something, look at this guy, and Spock's response was too much LDS, and I thought that was a good line.
that's hilarious. Yeah, that could be too. That's another form of
Yeah,
mind trip.
yeah,
Uh,
but
okay,
it's all about the form that the ego is enamored with, right?
is
It's got to
absolutely.
be this particular drug, this particular uh, paramour, this particular job, this particular car, this particular house, this particular geography, this particular fill in the blanks, right? And we don't, boy, do we fill in all those blanks and make them special and burn incense to them and do whatever else
Yeah,
we do.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I love it. I'm allergic to incense now, so
Oh, oh
it
gosh.
makes me sneeze. So none of that.
Okay.
But, all right,
How
yeah,
about how
I'll
about
let you
peppermint?
breathe.
Yeah.
You're allergic to peppermint?
No. I was just remembering the
Oh,
60s.
incense and
Yeah,
peppermint.
right, right.
Yeah,
Anyway, since we're having flashback Saturday here. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Should I read a little bit?
Yes,
And
yeah.
then I
Have you
need to
done
leave
some
about
research?
about
Okay.
5 minutes earlier, so because I'm uh, recording and facilitating a group at the bottom of the hour.
All right.
Okay.
Very good.
So coincident with this were several strange and sometimes frightening events tying into what you were saying about bad acid trips. Not, I don't think that's what he's talking about, but that actually began during the summer. They included some most peculiar, quote, ESP, unquote, not LSD, but ESP experiences, such as dreaming of friends being in certain situations, which indeed I later discovered to be true, unexplainable sounds emerging one night from my record player when no record was on, and a bird rapping incessantly, if not urgently, on my kitchen window one morning as if trying to get in. It was just Edgar Allan Poe reincarnated. No, no, not, I made that up. Okay, not the Raven. Okay. In some of my clinical work or personal contacts with people, I would suddenly receive strikingly clear images of or an awareness about their future or present unconscious states. They seem to be more than just clinical intuition. And I'm going to pause for a moment to suggest, I think I might have mentioned before that of the what I consider the Fab Four of Helen, Bill, Ken, and Judy. I have in my hands a copy of. You can probably find it on Amazon. That's where I got it a few years back, well, better part of a decade ago. It's Double Vision by Judith Skutch and Tamara Cohen, which is Judy Skutch-Whitson and uh, Tam Morgan, and it's a really fun dual autobiography that they co-wrote, and they Tam had a very psychic history, and she was uh, rubbed elbows with Uri Geller, and Judy's apartment in New York was like a who's who in the paranormal realm in the 70s and that era. So it's a fun read and a lot of familiar names if since those of us were in that era probably a lot of us were into that kind of stuff. And in some ways that was a preface for our interest in going beyond the paranormal to making what seemed to be exceptional normal. And I think that's what the course is trying to do is take the things that were just occasional peak experiences and make them the everyday experience. So if that
Which
makes sense.
is really what we want,
Yeah, yeah,
is that higher experience of connection.
right.
And that whole idea of ESP, I remember all that Uri Geller. I had those cards. I never been to Spoon, but
I always thought Uri Geller should have gotten together with Reese Witherspoon, though. That would have been so appropriate, right?
oh, she could have, he could have ruined all her spoons. Anyway, but yeah, that whole era of just finding out there was more to the mind than what we had experienced in the past. That became a big uh, part of my life and yours as well. So, we were all just out there getting ready for this,
Yeah, yeah.
getting ready for
And
this.
and and we'll probably look back in X number of days, months, years, decades, and say, wow, what we were doing on Saturday mornings and all the other things we do with the course and related ideas was preparing us for where we are then, which was the next to now of
Yes,
eternity, right? Yep,
yes,
yep.
yeah. The
Hopefully,
now and next now,
yeah.
and next now and next now. So let's see.
Okay,
We
I was in the middle of that paragraph. So I'll start that sentence over again.
okay.
They included some most peculiar ESP experiences, such as dreaming of friends, being in certain situations, which indeed I later discovered to be true. Unexplainable sounds emerging one night from my record player when no record was on, and a bird rapping incessantly, if not urgently, on my kitchen window one morning as if trying to get in. In some of my clinical work or personal contacts with people, I would suddenly receive strikingly clear images of or an awareness about their future or present unconscious states. These seem to be more than just clinical intuition. And then he says, and finally, let me get back to where I'm at here. And finally, in the fall of 1971, there came a sudden interest in the quote demonic unquote. It began one evening when I felt a strong desire to hear Wagner's Flying Dutchman, and most particularly the Sailor's Chorus from the third act. It is only a mildly eerie bit of music, but this one time in the darkness, it called forth all sorts of demonic feelings and images for me. I was not frightened as I once would have been, but intrigued. A theme for a quote demonic unquote story came to me and I quickly wrote it down. The fascination grew to include the Wolf Glen scene from Weber's Der Freischütz. I hope I didn't damage the pronunciation too badly on that. A very evocative musical painting, which does specifically deal with the invocation of satanic forces, and with my rereading of Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus. Interestingly enough, I've been getting quotes from a friend who is very much into Ken's work, and he's been gleaning quotes from Ken's apparently gave a talk on the Faustian bargain or something like that that we make with the ego. So I think this all kind of fits into that. Okay. All this culminated in my picking up the ongoing unfinished fairy tale and incorporating it into a tale, which was quite terrifying and satanic, totally unlike anything I'd ever done. Still, it unfolded from me in similar fashion as I did the other writing. In some sense, it seemed to be a counterbalance to the other side of me, and I think expressed an aspect of my inner life which could have been dangerous to me if I were not careful. And I'm just going to conclude that before I sign off with, I suspect that was probably helpful for Ken to to look at the ego, to look at the the devilish, if you will, or antichrist aspect of mind that really is not our friend. And if we can see the neutrality of that thought system's nothingness, trying to make something out of nothing, the only danger, if you will, is that we want to make uh, our misery our identity, and in order to have an identity, which we think is that's really the consolation prize. So anyway, I need to sign off a few minutes early, but as always, thank you, Lynn, and all of you joining and listening to this later. And have a very peaceful, wonderful week, and love to all.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And I do appreciate your being here and, go off and do your thing.
Likewise. Have a great week. Thanks.
You too, my friend.